So, hi everyone. Our 163rd episode under Transliterature series is definitely delving into some very, very dangerous and treacherous waters today. Secrets, lies, and suspense. Our latest episode of our podcast, Transliterature series today, dives into the thrilling world of the author Rohit Hari Ranjan's latest book, Party to Crime. A missing startup founder, foremost unreliable testimonies, and a web of deception. My God, this story definitely kept me guessing to the very, very end. And it is definitely a must read for fans of crime fiction and psychological thrillers. So, welcome, Rohit. What a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you. Likewise.
Rohit, you are an alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad. Besides being a sales manager, I've been through your LinkedIn profile. Oh my God, what a comprehensive corporate profile you have. Management consultant, recruiter, CEO, and a tech company executive. Having written a book, I would say dash, 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 because I couldn't pronounce the. Please spell it for us. Please pronounce it for us. The last book was I
Yeah.
am.
It was IIM Ganjdundwara,
Okay.
and yeah, it was published almost 16 years ago now.
Oh my God. So suddenly you're back to writing. Was it also a crime thriller? What was it about? Maybe a little bit of the last
No,
book.
actually, that was the story of, and no similarities, of course, but it was a story of two MBAs who've just come out of business school, joined an FMCG company, and been sent off to a couple of villages on a rural stint.
Okay.
It was, just a story of what they felt and sort of this clash between urban and rural India of the early 2000s.
Absolutely a different story, I must say.
Oh,
Absolutely
yes.
different tangent altogether. So what really inspired you to write this very, very intriguing story of a missing startup founder? I know you worked with a startup, as I see from your profile, and the intricate web of secrets that surround him.
Yeah, I think it's actually quite funny. So two events happened, and then they just sort of culminated in the book. The first of these was that, funnily enough, the name of the book popped up because I was at a party, and I'm quite an introvert and sort of tend to hang out with a very small set of friends and so on. But I was at this large gathering, didn't quite know what I was doing there, and I was bored out of my wits. And so for that reason, I should remember not to mention whose party it was. But I'm there and bored, and I come out of it, and later I'm talking to my wife and a few other people, and everybody else had a very different description of the party. So it was almost we were all at at a different party. And to entertain myself, I had this whole image during this party. I was just thinking of this, very filmy 1980s Hindi movie style. What if the police were to just sort of rampage in and do something and just spice up this party and so on. So the phrase "party to a crime" sort of popped up right there. And the second event was that a few days later, I was at a concert.
Okay.
This was in Bombay, Mehboob Studios, and it was a blues concert. And I was just really lost in the music and really enjoying the music. And somehow the music also just sort of, transported me into thinking about, and I was reminded of this party. And it's, what if I were to actually make a book out of it or a story out of it?
Mhm.
And there, in sort of that evening, I had one paragraph in my head, which was the plot of the book. And so now that I had a name and a plot, what was left was, the easy part of actually writing a 65,000 words or so to build that story out. And that's what happened over the next several months.
Oh my God. And so how many months did you take to put it all together? It's quite intriguing, it's got a twist and a turn every time that you're reading it, and very, very well drafted. And the kind of
Thank
busy
you.
life you have, I wonder how did you get time to kind of keep on thinking about this? Okay, one party you had this vision, but it had to carry on, carry through. And with your busy, busy schedule, I know how we kind of finally got about talking to you today. You've been busy with all your meetings and everything, and still you write something as diverse as this. I have read the book. I can't really give it away to all the viewers because they need to read the book. I can't really go in.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm holding myself up. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's just it's something I'm very it's something that gives me a lot of energy. And so, far from taking time out to do it, in my case, it's actually something that's enabled me to input time into other things. And then that's just worked for me. And to your original question, I think the question of how long it took, in my own head, I'm never quite clear, simply because the book as it exists today was not version one or two or three, and it just kept, evolving. Version one took about a month of writing.
Okay.
And then after that, I just sort of put it away, and 6 months later read it and was aghast that I had written it. And so then that led to version two. And then sort of there was this whole journey of getting folks to review it and edit it, and each of them would come back with different suggestions, and went through. Frankly, the more than the suggestions, it was this whole the highs and lows of feeling, okay, somebody seems to like it. And then the low of reading that review and saying, oh my God, how could I be this bad, right? So, and then trying to, work out and come up with a new version. So
Hmm.
that process took much longer time. And yeah, between the first party and the concert and publishing, we've actually gone through almost 5 years.
But I'm sure you're enjoying the parties more now because you feel that, yes, at least something the parties gave. They gave you your plot. I
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, to briefly discuss it, I know we're not going deep into it simply because, it's a read that you need to kind of experience it, right? So the story really unfolds through the perspective of four characters, right? Each with their own secrets, each with their own deception, their own intrigue. So how did you really balance this narrative while keeping the suspense alive? Because this was, as you just mentioned, uh, you know, uh, different views and different four parts. And I mean, so much was happening in the book. Yeah. So how did you kind
Yeah.
of
I mean,
balance their narratives?
yeah. I mean, so again, and at the core of this book is, there are a few very simple questions. And you have these two sort of the two CBI investigators who are reviewing testimony. And, they've asked the same question. They posed the same question to four different witnesses who turn out to become suspects, who turn out to become witnesses, and we don't know what they are. But and so it's just each question being answered by one of those four. And I think the tough part for me was to think about, sort of the first one would be easy. I would start with one character and describe the whole, answer to that question, and that would be easy. But then when you come to the second one, you want it to be different from the first, and yet, you
Hmm.
know, build in enough connections to make it sound like the same event.
Hmm.
And that's where I would honestly keep tying myself into knots, because I would do that and I would write the third one, and then I would come back and realize that all three can't possibly be sort of, you don't want them to be true. You want the reader to discover that there is some inconsistency there, but you also don't want it to be so blatant that it's just careless.
Hmm.
So I think that was just trial and error, a lot of error, and therefore a lot of retrials. But that's what I was trying to do, and I benefited from having a bunch of folks who would then read it
Hmm.
and frankly just call it out. And so there was just some very honest feedback coming my way, and that helped me. So it wasn't very pleasant necessarily, but it was just very helpful.
But how do you think readers, I know your people who were giving you feedback is different, but how about your readers? How do you think they will relate? And they are relating to the characters and their struggles. So do you really Google their reviews, or are you reading those reviews by the readers, and how's it happening with you now? Because it is ultimately going to reach the readers, and it is reaching. So it's fairly new, and it is evolving and everything. So how do you?
Yeah, so it is new, and I think for now it is new. I'm seeing a few early responses. Either the first wave of responses, as you would imagine, were people who knew me and would write to me, and that was very nice and encouraging. But a part of me was also, thinking, yes, but these people know me, so they're of course going to be nice. Um, I think then came sort of an emerging second phase where it was people who I have never met or I don't know who are writing about it. Um, and it's been very gratifying, actually. I mean, it's just been very. I felt really good reading them. I've read a few where I felt, oh, this person caught something that I should have thought of earlier.
Okay.
There's almost an urge to go back to another version, and I obviously can't do another version right now, but some of that. But by and large, I've really enjoyed the sort of response, the reception I've got, and so it's been very satisfying to see that by and large, most folks have appreciated the twists and sort of liked the humor in it and liked the contradictions in it. So that's been a very good feeling.
The startup founder, main protagonist, Karan, is described as young, famous, unpredictable, mostly. When you read the book, you realize that he's quite unpredictable in every aspect of his life, I would say. So, what really drew you to kind of create such a layered protagonist? He was quite layered. I mean, this is as much as I can describe about him right now without giving much away. Quite layered, quite complex at times, but do you think the startup founders at times who are immensely as successful as him can be as layered? I mean, are you drawing some kind of similarity with maybe few people that you've worked with?
Um, so not necessarily startup founders. I mean, there is obviously you sort of as you build characters, you end up taking something from people and so on. Um, To your first question, though, I think the startup founders that I've had the privilege of knowing have all been, I can't think of anyone who's been sort of, monodimensional. They've all been multidimensional. They've all been people who would have been incredibly successful in a whole range of different industries, professions and so on. So but this character, I think, for me in the book had the additional challenge was that this book is, you called this character the protagonist, and this book is about this character,
Yeah.
but never once does the character actually show up.
Hmm.
Because the book is always about people talking about this character, and not
Yes.
once is this character actually going to say anything.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was this: how do I make a reader invest in this layer? Because you're reading when you read the book as a reader, you're reading from the viewpoint of an investigator who's listening to the testimony that's describing a character. So you're already like three steps removed from a character who's never going to show up in the book. And the entire book is predicated. You are going to finish that book. You're going to read that book only if I can somehow get you to invest some interest in this character that hasn't yet appeared. And so for that reason, it had to be layered. It had to be someone who would keep, showing a
Almost
different
surprised.
facet of personality without showing up. So, so that was the big challenge. And so, at every step, I was just trying to think about a way to make him do something, or, through the eyes of someone who's narrating it to someone who's, narrating it to someone else, just come across as a maverick, and yet very smart, very successful, and yet also quite confused about what they wanted to do. So yeah, so that was the attempt.
One can make out you really had fun writing about him. You kind of really enjoyed, when you're speaking, it's getting through. But
I
I,
did.
I mean, how challenging was it to write for you? So he definitely, I would say, a most interesting character, somebody you really pitched in the way he's come out, really. So how challenging was it to write to you? Were you ever, you had something in mind initially that I'll write like this, and then it got layered and layered and layered? How does it happen with you while you were sketching the character, the process?
Yeah.
Some people do benefit from this kind of a dialogue so that they know this
Mhm.
characterization is so important for any book, and especially in your book, it became the center point.
So for me, I think I tried different things. So the first of all, that core premise of the book was, literally about a 50-word paragraph, which was just something I knew I was gunning towards. It was that core premise of the book came first. And like I said, the name came first, and then I
Mm.
went backward from the name and had that premise in my head.
Mm.
Um, I think as I started writing it out, there were a couple of challenges. One was, like you said, I was really enjoying the writing,
Mm.
but realistically, I was typing it out on a word processor, but I think faster than I can type. And so very often I would have this whole grand idea or vision, and I would
Hmm.
be furiously typing away. And then I would turn around and read it and say, this has nothing to do with what I had in my mind. And feel quite so there were these highs and the lows were quite low. And the number of times I've just abandoned it and figured this is something I'm going to just throw into the bin and never look at. So the lows were very low. The highs, on the other hand, was, I would read one paragraph somewhere that I've written and I would actually like it and say, okay, this could be interesting, and then try and build that out. And I tried multiple different things because there were different characters, because each of them needed to have a different voice. At one point, I had a whole spreadsheet where I was trying to write down mannerisms of each character, which only confused me, frankly. And I think the short answer is, frankly, it was just the iterative process of doing this again and again, coupled with the breaks I gave between it. And in retrospect, the fact that there was a pandemic which happened after version 2 and just slowed down everything else gave me more time to reflect on it and sort of be with it and think about it. And so I think those iterations, and quite honestly, just I was just so engrossed in it that I was willing to give it those multiple iterations and the space between the iterations. And I think that helped.
And these four characters, the four witnesses, which are very important, be it Vanki, be it Mohit, be it Abhinav or Maya for that matter, they had something to hide every point of time. So, which character story, apart from Karan that we've discussed so extensively, or perspective really surprised you the most? Any character
It's very
which, uh,
Yeah, it's very funny that you asked this question. It's so insightful because
hmm,
as the book developed, it was almost as if some of these characters were developing. I mean, sometimes
hmm,
I didn't know how they were going while I was writing, and then suddenly I see them developing in a way. And funnily enough, as opposed to Venki or Avinav or Karan or Maya, who are the four witnesses that the investigators are sort of questioning, in my mind, it was the investigators that developed more.
yeah,
The
both of them.
this very sort of proper middle-aged, CBI investigator
Yes,
who's
yes,
got a daughter who's gone into this engineering and has met the founder Karan and so on. So some of those things that kept layering on. So for me, frankly, the find was that. And if I were to write a sequel, and I don't know if I will, but if I were to write a sequel, this person will probably be the one who will come back, because I think it just that the book then became this, looking at a very new and very different India
hmm,
through the eyes of a very, it was sort of the India I live in versus the India I grew up in. And, I said somewhere earlier, it was almost sort of the Doordarshan versus Netflix sort of a contradiction. And so for me, the character of that investigator trying to make sense of this world of startups, that was the character that surprised me the most.
absolutely. And that current India that you talk about, so I am getting this very, very relevant question that, how do you think the book's theme of ambition, secrecy, and betrayal really resonate with the fast-paced startup world that we have today, that we continuously talk about, the basis of India right now, the growing economy? So how does, because it has that meaning, that it's basically revolved around that, ultimately, your book. There was this startup founder. So how do you think the theme of ambition, betrayal, and secrecy really resonate with today's world of startups?
I would say ambition,
Mm,
optimism, and just this inherent confidence.
mm,
Those are the themes which I think resonate pretty well, and not just with startups, but also with the India that we are in today. I
mm,
think, and so if you look at any of these characters, right? So, I mean, each of these characters is hiding something, and that's the secrets that you refer to. But equally, each character is just so confident in the way they are hiding their secrets, so confident in the way even when they are caught out. And you have this moment where the two middle-aged investigators, they turn to each other and they're actually chatting and wondering, how can these, and the way they phrase it is, how can these kids be so confident?
yes.
We know they're doing something wrong. They know they've been caught at something, and
Mm,
yet they're so confident, right? So I think for me, that was the pivot, that pivot of being so optimistic, so ambitious, and so confident that you can pull it off.
yeah.
And to me, that's also a lot to do with the way we are as a country right now, right? There's so many things that can go wrong. There's so many things that cannot work out the way you want it to. But underlying them is that tenacity that comes from an ambition and from a confidence that that ambition can be realized.
Do you think writing of this book, and because you're talking so much about this corporate culture, also has to do with the fact that you've had diverse experiences of management consultancy, observing people, having worked with a startup, having worked with a place management, such a senior management consultancy firm, and also right now with such a global tech giant. So do you think it really helped you bringing out the perspectives, as I mentioned in the book? Because your background, I felt, and then I read about you more, I felt that it really gives it that extra edge. So do you think that too, that really helped you because you've had that kind of diverse background?
I mean, I think, yeah, I am for sure the product of my experiences. And so, and there's sometimes when I feel that my experiences have been pretty straight line because, I did an MBA and I went into a corporate world and I've stayed in a corporate sort of a career. And there are other times when I feel that within that corporate career, there are times when I wonder when I'll decide what I want to be when I grow up because I just sort of, like you said, I was in sales in consumer packaged goods, and then I was a management consultant. I was a, leadership recruiter for a while, and then I was in startups and two very different kinds of startups before I took on my current job. I think all of those do shape a lot of what's in the book and a lot of who I am. So there's no denying that. But that said, I think part of the whole joy of writing this book is also to just step away from all of that.
Hmm.
And so, if they were to chronicle what I see in my day-to-day life, that would probably make it boring for me to write. It's precisely because they're so different that I'm enjoying, waltzing off into this fantasy and then going back to my day job.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned at the beginning, writing about something so very different. I mean, you're writing about crime fiction of all the things possible. It being so different from the first book you wrote 16 years back, and then 16 years corporate and everything, you've the kind of experience that you have had. So what do you think is the most exciting part about writing crime fiction for people who want to get into crime fiction, already writing crime fiction? What is this, that extra thing that you got from it, that you chose this genre? And because it created suspense, it created such complex characters and surprise the reader at every different page, at every different version that you. So, what was that excitement part that got you into this? That yes, how was it with you? Yeah.
So, I'll draw a very random parallel. I studied classical music for a long time, and I
Okay.
still do. And in classical music, you have this concept of a jugalbandi. And in particular, you often have in a concert in classical music, you have this concept of a prashnotter, right? Where you could have an instrumentalist and tabla just sort of do a sawal jawab kind of a, to and fro. And in many ways, for me, when I was writing this book, that was going on because the thing about crime fiction as opposed to other fiction is you have to have this grand reveal, that grand unlock because you're building up to a mystery. It's almost like a crescendo in music, right? So you have to have that grand, satisfying unlock. And the problem with that unlock is if it is completely out of the blue, if it is something completely unexpected, then frankly, it is going to be out of tune.
Mm.
So you have to be within the rag, within the rhythm, within the tune. And so it has to be something that could be expected. And yet, if it is something that everybody was expecting,
Mm.
then while it might be in tune and in rhythm and fit all the rules of the rag, it's not going to be all that entertaining. So how do you manage to create a surprise that in retrospect is not going to be a surprise? It's, going to sound very logical. And that's that jugalbandi thing, that tension of sort of trying to write it in a way that it's logical and yet write it in a way that it's a surprise. And so for me, that on a crime fiction more than anywhere else is just so much such a it's just a very high source of energy for me.
Absolutely. See, this part we didn't know about this, that you are also into music. So maybe the reason why we could not get any interview date with you the last 3 days, were you busy with Jashne Rekta or something? Were you there for all the musical concerts happening?
Good. Well, I missed that one. The one I did show up for a few days ago was the Brian Adams concert.
Oh,
which is not exactly classical music, but something I certainly loved growing up, and saw a very different sign of this time because I went with my 13-year-old daughter, and just watching her enjoy it was quite a high.
fantastic. See, music gives you so many dimensions. It doesn't only have to be classical that you're interested in, but there's so much.
Exactly.
And Brian Adams, still at this age, sings the way he used to earlier. So he's fantastic. I was
But
thinking,
what age? He's just 18 till he dies, right?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what he says. Yeah. But I missed it, but I still regret that. Uh, yeah. When I was going through a book, I realized that maybe someday it would be, maybe you write a sequel, but yes, there might be a possibility that it gets adapted because it has that factor that yes, one likes to unravel that. So if you had to cast, for example, actors for a movie adaptation of the movie of this book, what do you think you would have thought about somebody? Right.
So that's a very, yeah. Um, Look, I mean, in all honesty, I would love for it to be adapted, and I can't, and it's not as if the idea of adaptation is new, right? It's something I've, of course, thought a lot of. Um, I don't know about the actors though, and
Mm,
I'll tell you why. In my mind, each of these characters, I
mm,
can see them. Their face, their voice, what they're wearing. For me, they're just so real that I can't possibly imagine, who would sort of play a role like that. Um, so yes, much as I would love to see it adapted, in my mind, it's almost as if, they would all be people who may not have, and I can't imagine anyone adapting it with, a set of a cast that's completely unknown.
mm.
And obviously, if we ever get around to adapting, I would love to have big, whatever they call A-list actors and so on. But right now, when I think of the characters, I can't think of a known face to match to them.
One can, because the kind of the plot it has, it definitely, I really wish you all the luck for it getting it adapted maybe someday in OTT platform of somewhere. But having gone through this process, is there any one tip that you, because there's so many aspiring writers who listen to our podcast, and I always would like your opinion as to what you think. Maybe some one piece of advice to aspiring writers, especially in the crime fiction genre. What do they do? What should they take care of? Or any suggestion from your side?
And I think, I mean, from my own experience, for whatever it's worth, I think that it to me, the difference between this book becoming reality and not boils down to resilience. It's just not, at least, it's not an easy word. You would imagine that writing is the tough part, and it takes a long time to write it and then, get people to help you finesse it and improve it and get to a point where you think you're ready. But then the really tough part begins because then navigating this world of, looking through who can represent your book and finding someone who can actually, invest in it and publish it and all of that. And then again, the changes that happen and sort of getting it ready. So I think the one thing that it takes to, at least for me, is resilience, just sort of caring enough about it to go through all the highs and the lows. And and I think sometimes the lows can be hard because you tend to be very harsh on yourself. You get to a moment where you read what you've written and say, this is just not what I was looking for. And so you want to just throw everything away. And then you have to come back to it in a few days and then start all over again and get it to a level you're happy with. So I would say that resilience, that tenacity, and sort of just sticking at it for iteration after iteration. At least for me, that was the one that was the toughest part and also the most rewarding eventually.
Thank you. This is a very important tip. So, anything, any more? What are we looking at in future from you? What are you already deciding? Seeing the such a wonderful response to this book, what are you thinking next? What are you writing next?
So I do actually, and like I said, sort of, building on the character that surprised me most in the development of the book. I do have, I want to do a sort of, uh, perhaps not a sequel, but a comeback to some of these characters. I even started on it. It is, but just given how much sort of effort this one took, I don't see it happening anytime soon. Um, the good part is I do have that, I don't have the full paragraph of how the entire story would go, but I have that half paragraph of how it would start. And so I'm hoping over the next few weeks I can get that paragraph ready and then starts the long haul of actually putting it into a book.
I think that's a very, very good step because I think your ideas always begin with a paragraph. So this book came out of this paragraph that you thought in a party. Now you already have a half a paragraph for the next book. Fantastic. I mean, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. So anything else that you'd like to talk about the book before we wrap it up for the day? And maybe look for our next conversation when you come out with your next book.
Well, I look forward to that, and thank you for the time and the platform and all the lovely things you said about the book. And yeah, I hope more of your viewers try it out, and I hope they like it.
No, they would definitely like it. And thank you so much for being on our platform. It's been such a pleasure. It's such a fantastic book being published by Aruba Publications. And all the best to you. I'm sure it'll do really good. It's already making waves. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
everyone
you so
for
much, Neeta.
joining in. Such a pleasure to have
Yeah.
everyone. And do subscribe to our channel so that more and more people can watch such wonderful conversations that we've had the privilege of conducting. Thank you. Thank you, Rohit.
Thank you.
See you sometime. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.